So when you open your laptop, there's usually a blue folder sitting right there on your desktop screen. You click it, you drag it to the trash, and you feel like you were manipulating a real physical object.
Right, but you and I both know there's obviously no actual blue folder inside that machine.
Exactly. I mean, they were just microscopic transistors, pulsing with electrical currents, executing millions of lines of binary code. The blue folder is really just a convenient illusion.
It's an interface. It's designed to hide the staggering, frankly, incomprehensible complexity of the actual hardware. Because if you had to read binary code just to save a Word document, you'd never get anything done.
Yeah, you'd be paralyzed. And today, in this deep dive, we are exploring a terrifying but also kind of liberating possibility. And that is the idea that evolution did the exact same thing to your brain.
It is a profoundly unsettling idea when you really sit with it, because we all walk around operating under this assumption of naive realism. We assume that when we look out the window at a tree, our eyes are just acting like high-definition cameras, passively recording the objective truth of the universe.
But according to the stack of sources we're looking at today, they really aren't. And we are pulling from an incredibly diverse collection of texts for this mission. I mean, we've got modern cognitive science papers, the 1,500-year-old Indian text, the Mandukya Karika, the Sufi martyrdom of Mansur al-Hallaj.
Oh, that story is intense.
It really is. Plus the Hermetic principles of the Kybalion, and even modern secular mindfulness. And the wild thing is, they are all pointing at the exact same conclusion. We are going to deconstruct reality itself and see how evolution actively hid the truth of the universe from you, basically just to keep you alive.
Yeah, that is the core premise of cognitive scientist Donald Hoffman's interface theory of perception. And Hoffman didn't just, philosophize about this. He and his team ran thousands of evolutionary game theory simulations using some very advanced mathematics.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Right.
Because the mechanism behind those simulations is what totally blew my mind.
Well, they wanted to see what happens when organisms that perceive absolute reality compete against organisms that only perceive what is strictly necessary for survival.
Right, so they programmed these digital environments with different creatures competing for resources. And one set of creatures was programmed to see all the complex data of their environment, like the exact objective truth of it.
Yes, and another set was programmed with an interface. So they didn't see the complexity, they just saw a simplified icon, like green means eat, red means run.
And what happened?
In every single simulation, the organism that saw the truth went extinct. Every time.
Wow.
Every time. Every time. Because perceiving objective reality requires massive amounts of computational energy and time. If you are calculating the exact quantum state and atomic structure of a tiger.
You are going to get eaten by that tiger.
Exactly. The organism that just sees a terrifying high-contrast danger icon reacts faster, it spends less energy, and it survives to pass on its genes. So Hoffman mathematically proved a concept he calls fitness beats truth.
So wait. Space and time, the three dimensions we physically move through, the seconds ticking on a clock, that isn't the actual structure of the universe. It's literally just our biological operating system.
Precisely. Space and time are just the desktop. Physical objects are just the icons on that desktop.
That is wild.
They are real in the sense that, yes, you have to interact with them to function, but they are entirely illusory in the sense that they do not resemble the underlying reality at all. The underlying reality is just an infinite, complex web of conscious agents interacting.
Okay, so modern cognitive science used supercomputers to figure out that the universe is an illusion. But if you rewind the clock roughly 1,500 years to ancient India, you find a philosopher named Gaudapada who figured out the exact same thing without a computer.
What's fascinating here is that this radical modern science is actually ancient news. Gaudapada's commentary on the Mandukya Upanishad introduced the doctrine of Ajativada, which is the theory of non-origination.
Right, meaning nothing is actually created.
Exactly. Gaudapada argued that from the ultimate, absolute standpoint, nothing was ever truly created. The entire physical universe, with all its distinct objects and individual subjects, is simply menetrisia. It's just a vibration of the mind.
And he used this brilliant analogy called aladasanti, the quenching of the fire brain.
Yes, the glowing stick.
Yeah. So imagine you are standing in pitch darkness, and you're holding a stick with a glowing red ember at the tip. If you start spinning that stick rapidly in a circle, your eyes perceive a solid ring of fire.
But the ring doesn't actually exist. The moment the motion stops, the ring vanishes, and you realize there was only ever a single stationary point of fire. The universe is just consciousness in motion.
It's exactly like taking a long exposure photograph of cars driving on a highway at night. You look at the photo and you see these solid, glowing rivers of red and white light. The motion itself creates the shape.
That's a great way to look at it.
So Gaudapada is basically saying the motion of our minds creates the shape of the universe.
Yes. When consciousness vibrates, when the mind is active, it renders the intricate, swirling shapes of the physical world. It projects the desktop interface. But when the mind achieves absolute stillness, the illusion collapses. The shapes vanish.
And only pure, non-dual consciousness remains.
Exactly.
Okay, look, I get the long exposure analogy, and I understand the desktop icon theory. But I have to push back here. Because if I am standing in the middle of a street, and a literal bus is barreling toward me at 60 miles an hour.
Right.
If that bus is just a desktop icon or, a vibration of my mind, why should I bother getting out of the way? If the whole thing is an illusion, why not just stand there? Does anything we do in this interface actually matter?
That is the ultimate paradox of this philosophy. And it's a trap a lot of people fall into when they first encounter non-dualism. They just slip into nihilism.
Nothing is real, so who cares?
Exactly. But the answer is you move out of the way because the illusion has gravity. It has strict rules. And if you ignore the rules of the interface while you are logged into it, you will experience very real suffering.
So the game is rigged, but you still have to play it.
Right. And to understand how to navigate this, we have to look at Jain philosophy, specifically the teachings of Mahavir in the 6th century BCE. He wrestled with this exact paradox of how an illusion can kill you.
And he came up with a doctrine for it, right?
Yes, he introduced Anekantavada, the doctrine of multiple realities or many-sidedness. It basically means that reality is incredibly complex and can only be understood from multiple, seemingly contradictory perspectives. No single statement captures absolute reality.
He used a clay pot as an example, didn't he?
He did.
Yeah.
So if you look at a clay pot from the perspective of its substance, the clay itself, it is eternal and permanent. But if you look at it from the perspective of its form, the shape of the pot, it is highly impermanent and can be shattered in a second.
And both things are entirely true at the same time.
Precisely. So from the absolute perspective of pure consciousness, the bus coming toward you is an illusion. But from the relative perspective of your physical body operating within the interface, that bus is absolutely going to shatter your form.
So Mahavir is saying you have to honor both realities. You can know you are pure consciousness, but you still have to look both ways before you cross the street.
More than that, actually. Mahavir taught that even in an illusion, there is cause and effect. Every action you take within the interface has a binding consequence. In Jainism, karma isn't just a metaphor or a concept.
Oh, right. They view it as physical matter.
Yes, literal atomic matter. It is a subtle microscopic dust that permeates the universe.
Wait, how does an invisible thought generate physical dust?
It's all about vibration. When you act out of anger, greed, or violence, your soul vibrates at a specific chaotic frequency. And that frequency acts like a magnet, attracting these karmic particles which physically stick to your soul.
So it weighs it down and obscures its natural brilliance.
Right, and it traps it in the cycle of suffering. The only way to stop accumulating this dust is to stop the chaotic vibration. This is the mechanism behind extreme ahimsa, the practice of radical nonviolence in thought, word, and deed.
You stop the friction, you stop the static electricity, and the dust stops clinging to you. That actually perfectly mirrors the Western esoteric traditions we looked at, specifically the Kybalion.
Oh, the 7 Hermetic principles.
Yeah. It starts with the principle of mentalism. The all is mind, the universe is mental. Basically, your thoughts are actively rendering the reality you experience. But it's the principle of polarity that really gives you the tool to hack this.
Because polarity states that everything is dual, right? Opposites are just two extremes of the exact same thing. Like hot and cold aren't different phenomena. They're literally just different degrees on the same thermometer.
Exactly. And if you apply that to your mind, it means fear and courage aren't two different things. They are the same emotion, just vibrating at different frequencies.
That makes a lot of sense.
Right. You don't have to destroy your fear. You just have to slide the mental slider up the pole toward courage. You are literally just turning up the heat.
You are shifting your vibration, which, to use Mahavir's framework, changes the type of matter your soul attracts.
So what does this all mean? I mean, practically speaking, how do we actively train our minds to stop clinging to the illusion and actually start finding freedom?
Well, there is a beautiful narrative in the Yoga Vasista that addresses this step by step. It starts with Prince Rama, who is only 15 years old. He has just returned from a grand tour of his kingdom, and instead of being energized, he falls into a state of profound depression.
Yeah, he just stops eating and talking.
Right. He is experiencing viraja, which is an intense, almost crushing dispassion for the world. Teenage angst about the meaningless, fleeting nature of the body and wealth.
It's like the ultimate existential dread. He looks at his wealth, his royal lineage, his own youthful body, and he suddenly sees the code behind the matrix. He realizes that disease, old age, and death will eventually devour all of it. Nothing lasts.
He sees the interface for what it is, and it completely paralyzes him. His father is terrified and brings in the great sage Vasistha to cure him. But Vasistha doesn't just tell Rama to snap out of it.
What does he do?
He tells Rama that to reach liberation, he must befriend 4 gatekeepers to freedom. And these aren't just abstract virtues, they are mechanical tools to stop the mind from vibrating.
Let's list those out for the listener because they're really practical.
First is Santi, which is quietness or self-control of the mind. When the mind is quiet, you stop projecting the terrifying shapes of the firebrand.
Makes sense.
Second is Vichara, the spirit of deep inquiry, asking, who am I? This hacks the code by turning the mind's analytical power back on itself.
Okay, what's the third?
Third is Santosha, supreme contentment. If you are deeply content with whatever comes unsought, you cut off desire. And desire is the main engine of karma.
And the last one.
Fourth is Satsanga, the company of the wise. You place yourself in an environment, a server, to use our tech analogy, that supports your realization rather than pulling you back into the illusion.
It's a very logical, structured approach.
Yeah.
You practice these 4 things, you gradually clean up your mind, and you eventually reach freedom.
Yes, but in the research, Dr. Surabhi Solanki points out that this kind of structured path is only one way to climb the mountain. She compares 2 foundational texts, the Bhagavad Gita and the Ashtavakra Gita, and the difference between them is massive.
They're completely opposite mechanisms, right?
Exactly. They aim for the exact same truth, but they cater to entirely different psychological states.
I picture it as the ladder versus the elevator. The Bhagavad Gita is a massive text, 18 chapters. It is the staircase
Yeah.
or the ladder, or like the medicine.
Because it assumes you are living in the world, you have a job, you have family duties.
Right. It acknowledges the world as relatively real and offers practical steps, like karma yoga, for gradual evolution.
Yeah.
It's a medicine you take over a lifetime to slowly cure your ignorance.
It honors the relative reality Mahavir talked about. It gives you a way to function within the interface.
But the Ashtavakra Gita is the elevator. It is the cure. It's 20 chapters of pure, uncompromising radicalism. It doesn't give you steps. It doesn't tell you to do your duty. It declares that you are already free right this second.
The psychology of the Ashtavakra Gita is profound. It argues that the very act of seeking freedom is what keeps you bound.
Wait, really? How does that work?
Well, if you sit down on a cushion to meditate for an hour because you think it's required to achieve liberation, your underlying psychological assumption is, I am currently trapped.
Oh, wow. You were trying to cure a sickness you don't actually have.
Exactly. You are pure consciousness. You are the sky, but you are obsessing over a passing cloud, and you're trying to perform breathing exercises to make the cloud go away.
And Ashtavakra basically grabs you by the shoulders and says, stop looking at the cloud. You are the sky.
This raises an important question for you listening right now. Which path are you on? Are you a householder needing the staircase, or are you an advanced seeker ready to take the elevator and just leap?
Because if you take the elevator, things get wild.
Yeah.
Here's where it gets really interesting. When you look at history, the people who actually fully embodied that radical realization, they lived lives that are almost incomprehensible to us.
You're talking about Mansur al-Hallaj.
Yes, the 9th century Sufi mystic. Because if we're talking about seeing through the interface, Hallaj literally broke the screen. He is one of the most polarizing and visceral figures in mystical history.
Visceral is definitely the word. He lived in a state of absolute unshielded union with the divine. The boundary between the creator and the created simply ceased to exist for him.
To give you an idea of how extreme he was, there's a story that he wore the same tattered woolen robe for 20 years. When his disciples finally insisted on removing it, to give him a clean one, they found a massive scorpion living inside the folds of the fabric.
And they tried to kill it, right?
Yeah, the disciples went to kill it, but Hallaj stopped them. He said the scorpion was his friend and that it had lived there for 2 decades.
His detachment from his physical body, from the instinct of self-preservation, was absolute. The interface of pain and danger just no longer registered for him. And this radical realization of non-duality led to his ultimate fatal proclamation.
Right, he began walking through the streets of Baghdad crying out, Anal-Haq, which translates to, I am the truth, or I am God.
Which, in 10th century religious orthodoxy, was the ultimate blasphemy. You do not claim to be the creator.
But Hallaj wasn't speaking as a human ego claiming divine power. He was speaking from the realization that only the fire exists, and the spinning shapes are an illusion. His individual ego had been completely extinguished.
The religious authorities did not see it that way, obviously. He was imprisoned for over a decade, whipped, and eventually sentenced to a gruesome martyrdom.
The accounts of his execution in Baghdad are deeply disturbing, but they really prove the depth of his realization. He was dragged to the scaffold, and the crowd was ordered to throw stones at him. He didn't make a sound.
Not a single sound.
But then a fellow Sufi, a man named Shebli, stepped up. And instead of a stone, Shebli threw a clod of earth with a flower on it. And when the flower hit Hallaj, he finally cried out in agony.
When they asked him why he wept for a flower but not the stones, Hallaj replied that the common people throwing stones were blind. They were trapped in the illusion. They didn't know what they were doing.
But Shebli was a mystic.
Yes. Shebli knew the truth, yet he still participated in the theater of violence just to appease the crowd. Hallaj wasn't crying from physical pain. He was mourning the spiritual compromise.
And it gets more intense. The executioner cut off his hands and feet, and Hallaj took his own severed stumps, bleeding profusely, and wiped the blood all over his face and forearms.
He told the crowd he was performing the ablution of love, painting his face with blood so that, as his body lost circulation, no one would see him grow pale and think he was afraid.
He was proving that he was not the body. He was showing them the interface breaking down in real time. And the historical accounts say that as his blood spilled and pooled on the wooden scaffold, it literally spelled out the words Anal-Haq in Arabic calligraphy.
It's incredible. They decapitated him, burned his body, and threw his ashes into the Tigris River. And the ashes continued to form the words Anal-Haq on the surface of the water.
It is a terrifying, awe-inspiring account of what it looks like when a human being fully merges with the underlying reality.
But we have to balance this extreme mysticism because we need to be very careful here. You do not need to seek out martyrdom or keep a scorpion in your jacket to experience this truth.
Thank goodness, because I am definitely not doing that.
We can look at another ancient text, the Avadhuta Gita, which balances this out perfectly. It introduces the concept of sahaja, which means the nectar of naturalness.
The nectar of naturalness. I like that.
Yeah, and it teaches samarasa, the interconnectedness and equal essence of all things. The Avadhuta Gita argues that true realization isn't about extreme asceticism or torturing the body. It is about resting completely naturally in whatever state you find yourself. You can experience it in the mundane.
Which bridges us perfectly to how this applies to someone listening to this deep dive right now, on their commute or while doing the dishes. Because Jon Kabat-Zinn took these exact concepts and brought them into the secular, modern medical establishment through mindfulness.
Kabat-Zinn's genius was stripping away the cultural and religious vocabulary while keeping the absolute core mechanism intact. He defined mindfulness not as escaping reality into some floating mystical void, but as entering a love affair with the present moment.
Right. In his book, Wherever You Go, There You Are, he talks about simply befriending yourself. And the way he applied this to chronic pain patients is incredible. He took people who were falling through the cracks of the healthcare system, people suffering from excruciating, permanent physical pain.
Remember Mahavir's clay pot. The pain in their physical bodies was very real within the relative interface.
Exactly. Kabat-Zinn didn't tell them the pain was fake. He taught them to observe the raw sensation of the pain without adding the mental narrative to it.
Because when we feel pain, our minds immediately start vibrating. This is awful. It's never going to stop. My life is ruined.
And that mental narrative is the karmic dust. Kabat-Zinn taught them to drop the story and just feel the raw data of the sensation. And by changing how they interacted with the interface, their experience of suffering dramatically decreased.
They decoupled the physical sensation from the psychological resistance. It is the exact same mechanism as Vasista's 4 gatekeepers. They used inquiry to observe the pain and contentment to accept its presence, which quieted the mind.
Sai Baba of Shirdi taught this in incredibly simple terms, too. As the ultimate bridge, he didn't demand massive philosophical study. He just asked his followers for 2 things, Shraddha and Saburi.
Shraddha is an unwavering, heart-centered faith, not necessarily in a specific deity, but in the ultimate goodness and reality of the universe. And Sabori is active, steady patience.
Just the endurance to sit through the turbulent moments.
Right, to sit through the illusion without losing your center, and combining that with the inner inquiry of, who am I?
And to ground this entirely in the modern day, just look at the story of Kayla Jeter and her 100 Miles of Summer Challenge. Kayla is a former athlete, and for most of her life, she viewed running as a punishment. It was a chore to stay fit.
But then her mother received a fatal cancer diagnosis.
Yes, and Kayla's entire world, her interface, just shattered. The grief was overwhelming. But instead of letting the mind spiral into chaos, she changed her relationship with running.
She used the physical, rhythmic act of putting one foot in front of the other as a moving meditation.
It became a container for her to process the loss. She recognized the Hermetic principle of rhythm. The Kybalion says everything flows out and in, the pendulum swing manifests in everything.
So she recognized she was in a sign of intense, outbound grief.
Yeah, and instead of fighting the pendulum, she moved with it. She let the rhythm of her feet ground her in the present moment, processing the pain without getting lost in the narrative.
She proved that spiritual liberation doesn't just happen sitting cross-legged in a Himalayan cave. It happens on the pavement. It happens while running through the grief.
So when we stack all of these sources together, from the mathematics of evolutionary biology to ancient mystics and modern athletes, what are we left with?
Well, whether you view reality through the lens of Donald Hoffman's desktop interface, Gaudapada's firebrand, or Kabat-Zinn's mindful awareness, the takeaway is exactly the same. The world is a fluid projection.
And because your perception actively creates this world, changing your perception literally changes your reality. You don't need to completely renounce the world.
No, not at all.
You can use Vasista's 4 gatekeepers today in your own life to find peace amidst the chaos of the interface. When you feel overwhelmed, apply the gatekeeper of inquiry. Just ask, who is it that feels overwhelmed? Separate the raw sensation from the mental dust.
I will leave you with a final, provocative thought to ponder tonight. If consciousness is the only fundamental reality, and the physical world is just an interface rendered by your observation,
Yeah.
what exactly happens to the universe, the stars, and the trees outside your window the moment you fall into a dreamless sleep tonight? Does the universe wait for you to wake up to exist again?
Sleep well, everyone.